Good morning, everyone. I have the pleasure of being the moderator for this session. I'm going to begin with the land acknowledgement. The 2024 National Conference on Ending Homelessness is being held on the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin peoples. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory since time immemorial. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. If I may just add a little bit about that, it does seem to me that there's a risk of land acknowledgements becoming an empty ritual. So I just want to add that I think we can, and this is a challenge to myself as much as anyone, that we can interpret land acknowledgements as an occasion to remind ourselves of the opportunity to do a little bit on our part toward putting into place the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So that being said, I'm really very pleased to introduce Juha Kahila, whom I've known for a bit more than a year, actually. Juha is the, did you say president? Head of International Relations at the Y Foundation in Finland. So Juha will be describing in detail what the Y Foundation does, as well as the Finnish approach to addressing homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And from now on, I will be used to president one. I think it's much cooler than head of international affairs. But first, before I start, I have to take a picture, because every time I travel, my wife always asks the same question. Is there actually anybody coming to see those presentations you talk about? So I need to have a proof that there is some people. Smile. Thank you. So my name is Juha Kahila, and yes, I come from Helsinki, Finland, where I work at the Y Foundation as a president of international affairs. And then it's a great pleasure to be here. I was here in January, and then visited here in Ottawa, and then in Winnipeg as well, and meet some great people, great projects, and so on. So I think you have some kind of momentum going on, I hope, at least on the practical side of things. So what I'm going to do today, usually I have a handheld mic, so I move around, so now I try to stay still. So I try my best. But today I will guide you through the Finnish homelessness work, a little bit about the past from the 60s, a couple of slides, then through the housing first, how we started, how does it look today, and what are the predictions for the future, because there has been some quite significant changes in the government side of things. In Finland as well, unfortunately, as you will hear later on. And I see a lot of familiar faces here. Nick always in the front row. Tim, Eric is moderating this thing. And some of my Canadian friends, they always say that I'm the most Canadian Finn because I always wear the Canadian tuxedos. But that is actually true. I have 8 different colors of these shirts, so I really like my Canadian tuxedos. But okay, jokes aside, let's take a more serious note and start the presentation. So this picture is from the 1960s, and then it's a shelter in the city of Helsinki. And it was built in a bomb shelter. So you can imagine some of those men, they have had war in the Second World War. They came back to Helsinki, for some reason ended up being homeless, and they were placed into a bomb shelter. From the front line to a bomb shelter. That was the reality in the 1960s in Finland, in the big cities. We used bomb shelters as shelters. Not a very good way to do the work, but we have learned since. And this is a picture of a shelter as well. And as you can see, there's a guard making sure that if you are intoxicated or behaving some other bad ways, in his opinion, he will not let you in. So not any kind of support was offered for people, mainly just, in and out, off you go. That's all they did. And this is from the 1980s, which is a big century, a decade in Finnish homelessness work. And this picture is from the city of Helsinki. And then the winters are quite harsh, they still are, especially last winter, the temperature, it was minus 25, minus 30 degrees for many weeks in a row. So it was really cold, a lot of snow, as you know, here in Canada as well. But back in the 80s, we had over 20,000 homeless people. And because of these harsh winters, many of the people unfortunately died on the streets. And that was the turning point in our thinking that, we need to be better than this. We can't run a social society if we have people dying on our streets. And back then, a few activists and politicians came together and said, enough is enough, we need to do something. So what we started to do, actually in 1987 is the first time we ever did homeless statistics. So that's how we get the number a little bit over 20,000 in the 80s. It was also the first decade, 1984, when the UN General Assembly talked about homelessness. And it was because of the Finnish ambassador who made that point that it should be also talked in the UN. And of course, the Y Foundation was founded in the 80s, 1985. And then what we do is that we build affordable house, state-subsidized affordable housing for low-income people, homeless people, and for those who are on the edge of becoming homeless. And we have been always saying that we have been doing housing first since 1985, because there has never been any boundaries accessing our homes. You may have substance abuse challenges, mental health challenges, but that has never been a problem to have access into our housing. And here I just want to showcase that, the 5 biggest cities in Finland have been the founding partners of the Y Foundation. Because the 5 biggest cities, they realized that they can't handle the situation by themselves. They need to have non-profit, non-political, strings-attached organization building homes for people in need. And this is where we are now. So we have a little bit over 19,000 apartments around Finland. 7,500 apartments, especially for homeless people or those who are on the edge of becoming homeless. And then almost 12,000 apartments, normal state-subsidized affordable housing for mainly low-income people, single parents, people exiting from prisons, and so on. Just normal housing, but affordable. But what makes Y Foundation quite unique is that we do a lot more than, just build affordable housing, even though that's the main thing we are doing. We have this development unit where I work, for example. We run different kind of projects around homelessness. The latest one have been around women homelessness, loneliness in scattered housing, and now we are running one. It's action sailing for young people who have been dropping out of school. It's a really good one. Good results so far. Then we also coordinate the National Housing First Development Network, where I used to work as a lead coordinator. And it brings together all the key stakeholders from the state level, government level, municipalities, landlords, support services, health services, justice department, but of course, people with lived experience. They are in the core of the network, of course. And then we also have a research team of our own. So we have 4 full-time researchers doing all kind of research around homelessness, housing first, affordable housing, but then again also things like carbon neutrality, green transitioning, and so on. And not only in Finland, but also globally together with our networks. So that's what makes Y Foundation quite a unique landlord. And we are Finland's 4th largest landlord at the moment. So what is social housing or affordable housing in Finland when we talk about it? 13% of all the housing in Finland is affordable state-subsidized housing. In the big cities, for example, in Helsinki, which is the capital of Finland, the goal is that whenever there's a new living area coming up, 25% should be affordable state-subsidized housing. So we want to build affordable housing everywhere, not just on the outskirts of the cities, because what we have found out that affordable housing is a good way to avoid segregation. It's a great way to have people, different backgrounds, different income levels, sharing the same areas, same services, and so on. So that's why we don't have to build fences in Finland, for example. But that's a great thing, 25% affordable housing in the new living areas in the big cities. Last year, there was over 8,500 new affordable homes in Finland under construction, and more will follow. And how we do it is, I use Y Foundation as an example. So when we start building affordable apartment building, we go to a bank and we ask for a loan. But one of the things how we are able to keep the rents affordable is that the state will guarantee our loan because we are a non-profit. We don't take any profit of our actions. So the state guarantees the loans, which means that the interest rate is much lower for us compared to private companies, for example. And then the other thing is that the city of Helsinki and all the other big cities, they usually own anything between 70 to 75% of the land in their cities. And they never sell the land anymore. They always lease the land, and the lease price for us is considerably lower compared to private sector once again. So with these two components, we are able to keep the rents affordable for our tenants. And in the big cities, like in Helsinki, for example, near the city center, the rents are usually 40% lower compared to the private sector. So people can actually afford to live in the city centers, in the good spots, as they should. And yes, I will just show you this one. When we talk about affordable housing or social housing, usually people think these gray boxes, and then they think that, you can only build gray boxes, nothing more, nothing less. But in Finland, we have realized that there is much more you can do with affordable housing. So I think this Jallukka is a great example that you can sometimes think outside the box as well. So we have built this together with the Elmu Foundation, which is like the living music foundation in Finland. And there is 74 apartments in this building. It's on a great spot, 1 kilometer from the city center on a waterfront. And there is 25 apartments that are reserved for low-income rock musicians, because not everyone makes it big in Japan. And what's great about this building is that there's also training facilities for these rock musicians. So they can actually practice in that building. And whenever we are having conference or seminar, we always hire the band from that building to play in those events. So this is just one example that, you can do many things with affordable housing. It doesn't have to be just those gray boxes as people, especially in Europe, may think. And of course, there's a sauna because it's Finland, so people need to have access to sauna. That's like mandatory, I would say. And then before this presentation, I heard that, someone has visited Norway and Sweden and take a sauna there. But I said that it's more like warm room in Sweden, and in Finland, it's like the real one. So you never know. But this is example from the city of Helsinki. They use the social mix in their zoning planning. And this is what it means in reality. So 25% affordable housing. And that picture is the area called Jätkäsaari, where the Jallukka building is, for example. And then you can see that all the purple spots, they are affordable housing for low-income people. And it works. I guarantee you that. And city of Helsinki has really done a great job within the past decades, and they plan to continue this method of social mix in their zoning policies. So, homelessness in Europe, just a few words. In Finland, we have been able to reduce the number of homeless people 12 years in a row now, and then we have been the only country in Europe, I would say globally, that has had such a success. Unfortunately, I say, because I would like to see this map, for example, full of green spots in the future. I know we'll get there, it will take some time, but I'm sure that, we'll find the ways. There are a lot of good things happening. I was just telling about Nick this morning that in Denmark there's a great national plan regarding homelessness, and they will do great things in the coming years. So if you want to check that out, I say that they are the next big thing when it comes to homelessness. So this is what has happened in Finland. So we have been doing the statistics since 1987, and you see the numbers have been going down. And then we do the point-in-time statistics, so once a year, and I think that's something that we are really lacking at the moment compared to you guys, for example. I know that the Build for Zero is doing well here in Canada and in the US as well, even in Denmark in one of the municipalities, so that's something that we look forward developing as well, that we get a more real-time data when it comes to homelessness, because that's something that we are really lacking at the moment, I say. But as you can see, I think the two turning points here are 2007, when we started the Housing First, which I will explain later, and then the early 1990s. Because then we had a huge national recession in Finland, and the politicians, they made a lot of horrible decisions regarding cutting the social benefits and so on. But one of the things, they were smart enough that they keep building affordable housing. So in Finland, for example, it didn't happen that we stopped building affordable housing in the early 1990s, which I believe happened here, happened in UK, and in many other countries around the world. That the politicians have this kind of naive belief that the market will take care of the affordable housing. It hasn't, it never will, and that's why we need state-subsidized affordable housing. And this is something our comms teams wants me to show you. This shows the correlation between the Y Foundation apartments and the number of homeless people in Finland. I think there is some truth in that. We have been building heavily new apartments for people in need, and of course buying apartments from the private sector as well, so we can rent them for people in need as well. So this is what it looks like at the moment. 3,429 homeless people in Finland. Like I said, it's a point-in-time stats, so I would say it's a trend. It's not the exact number, of course, but it gives us the trend and see how our work is affecting on things in a bigger scale. And long-term homeless in Finland means that someone has been homeless over a year or many times during a 3-year period. And then short-term homeless is under a year. And this is just to visualize the change we have been able to do in Finland. So 83% decrease in the number of homelessness since 1980s. And of course, that's something that we are really, really proud of. And with the families, the reduction have been even bigger, so 91%. So last year, 123 homeless families. But I must stress that when we are talking about families, I'm talking about couples as well. So in Finland, if you are under 18, under no circumstances you should end up in a shelter or in the streets. The social services will take care of children's needs if their parents can't. So let's move to Housing First. So we started in 2008 in Finland, but I must say that the whole work started already in 2007. In the Mark's keynote today, this morning, you heard from the Jan Vapaavuori, who was the housing minister back in 2007. And he was our politician who was the champion. He really was. Because he comes from the National Coalition Party, which is considered as a conservative political party in Finland. But when he became the housing minister, he asked one question. How can it be so hard to find home for these people? I think it's a good question. And so he appointed this group of 4 Ys. It was called back then. And the 4 Ys, they came back with a report, which was called Name on the Door. And it's still the framework for the Finnish Housing First. And I think the funny story is that the 4 Ys, they didn't know about the existing US model of Housing First. They had no idea. After they had made the report, they Googled it and find out that, okay, there are quite many similarities in our report and in this model, so they start calling it the Housing First Finland. Would the name be same today? I don't know. I think it's Housing First. then again, it's people first and so on. But I don't think the name really matters. I think the main thing has been that we have been able to house many people in their own safe homes. But the other thing Jan Vapaavuori wanted to do is to really change the systems. He didn't want to start with a pilot project here and there. Let's start this out in one city or two cities. No. We roll out the national program and really change the systems, how we work in this field. So the first two programs, they were all about renovating the existing shelters and temporary accommodation into permanent homes for people. I will have pictures later on. Then the third program was all about prevention. So we know that we can house all the people, but now we need to learn also how to make sure that no one ends up being homeless in the first place together. And the fourth program was all about cooperation between the municipalities and the cities and how root and this work there. And now we have this latest program, which is about ending long-term homelessness by 27. Not all homelessness, but long-term homelessness. Big difference, in my opinion. So this is what happened in Finland. So we had been putting a lot of money into emergency response. We built a lot of shelters, a lot of temporary accommodation. You know, I would say you can build as many shelters as you can, and they will all be still full. That's what happens. We use very little money on prevention and housing and support. But after we made the swift shift to housing first, we start spending more money on prevention. We renovate the shelters and temporary accommodation into permanent homes. We start building even more state-subsidized affordable housing. We train the employees, the support workers. We hired new support workers, many hundreds. So we didn't have to spend all that money into emergency response, which doesn't end homelessness. It's only manage the homelessness. And back in 2008, I don't know if you remember, but there was a global banking crisis during those years. And we were able to find almost 300 million euros to put into this work. So when some politicians sometimes, not always, but sometimes say that, Juha, but we don't have the money, I tell this story because if a poor country like Finland, not poor in that sense, but compared to Canada and US, can find the money, I think you can as well. And then the other thing is that, you know, you are already using quite a bit of money into the existing services. So how about dividing some of that money a little bit differently? Instead of building the new shelter, how about using that money into prevention so you don't need the shelter in the first place? Just an ideas and thoughts. But this is the housing first in Finland, like we see it, how we do the work. So it's not for a certain group of people among homelessness, like veterans or young people or families. It's designed for everyone, because in our point of view, it doesn't matter if you are homeless only for one day, you still need a home, a permanent place to stay. Support needs vary, of course. But the Finnish model is meant for everyone facing homelessness and for those who are on the edge of becoming homeless. So it starts with the different housing options. So we don't rely only on scattered housing because we have found out that people need different things. And not everyone wants to live in a scattered housing, so we have different models for different needs. I will show them later. I have some good pictures, new pictures actually. It's always permanent housing, so people sign their own rental agreement for unlimited time, and it's their home. Simple as that. And then the support, tailor-made, as long as needed, as it should be. And we use ICM most of the time, so we like to think that, you know, if you are homeless, you should still use the existing social and health services as anyone else. It's part of the number 6, the normality aspect of the things, and so that's what we do. And then, of course, affordable housing is the best structural element against homelessness. So, of course, that's part of the Finnish model as well. And like I said, we have been in a lucky position that we've had politicians who have seen the value in the affordable housing and they have keep building it. And then, of course, that's one of the cornerstones that we have, that many other countries don't have at the moment, at least. And then the number 4 is the prevention. So beside the affordable housing, we have We have developed these different prevention services, and I will show you those later as well. And then the number 5 is these low threshold work activities, because we found out that when people get the home and the support, after a while, they need meaningful things to do as well. And not everyone is able to go to a full-time work or part-time work, so we have created these low threshold work activities together with the tenants. But I will once again show you later some pictures. But the number 6, in my point of view, is the most important one, this kind of normality aspect. That people, they live in the same kind of apartments as anyone else, sign the same rental agreements as anyone else, can claim the same benefits as anyone else, live in the same neighborhoods, same parts of the cities as anyone else. So it's like a normal thing, because people are homeless for a while. They are not homeless for the rest of their lives, at least not in Finland. So a little bit more about the housing. So, like I said, we don't rely only on scattered housing. We have different options, because how we see it is that one size doesn't fit for all when it comes to housing. And when we talk about housing first, we usually talk about the support side, that it has to be tailor-made. But we like to also think that in the housing, it should also be a little bit of a tailor-made for people's needs. And that's what we have done. So we have scattered housing, congregate housing, and then we have these new hybrid solutions as well. And I will show you the pictures now. So this is the rate. So I must stress that 80% of the former homeless people, they are living in scattered housing, and then 20% is housing first units, and then these new hybrid solutions. So 80% is scattered housing, 20% in these other solutions. So this is scattered housing, the one with the yellow stripe. It's built by us, the Y Foundation. It's in the Jätkäsaari area once again, really expensive area. And then a duplex 15 square meters can cost anything between 500,000 to 600,000 euros, which in the Finnish perspective is really, really expensive. But there is affordable housing in the middle of the block. And then there is 65 apartments in this building, and then 2 former people living there in that building, and they get the support from other NGOs or from the city. And it's usually floating support, so home visits and those kind of things. So that's the scattered housing that you all are quite familiar with, I think. This is not a housing option. This used to be a shelter, but I just want to show you this picture because I think there's a great story behind this picture. This shelter was built in 1987. It was state-of-the-art shelter. So there was actually a fridge in a room, so people didn't have to hang the food from the windows, so it stays fresh. But the story is that this was supposed to be only for 3 years. So they were supposed to close this down in 1990, after 3 years. And as you can see, it closed down in 2009, which means that these temporary solutions tend to become quite permanent after all. And not too cheap either, not ending homelessness for anybody. So that's the story behind all these housing things. So, congregate housing. Permanent rental contracts, support on site downstairs 24/7 if and when needed. Support team usually have nurse, Bachelor of Social Sciences, work coaches, practical nurses. Usually 2 or 3 units, they also share a therapist. And then they do bunch of neighborhood work, low threshold work activities, and all these kind of things. And it's always recovery orientation, harm reduction, and so on. But the first one, the number 1, it's a housing first unit with 81 individual apartments, mainly studio apartments. There are 2 or 3 duplex apartments as well. But that used to be the biggest shelter in the whole Northern Europe. And in the peak days, there was over 250 bed places. And after the renovation, 81 individual apartments. And the number 2, it used to be a hotel. And now after the renovation, it's a home for 83 formerly homeless people. And the number 5, it used to be a shelter as well in the city of Espoo, not too far away from Helsinki. There was 45 bed places, and now there is 31 apartments. And all of these concrete solutions, they are in a really good, the location is really good. They are there where the services are, as it should be. So near the city centers, near the services, good public transportation so people can move in and out and so on. And then there are also a little bit of different profiles in these units. For example, the number 3, it's mostly for young homeless people. So 85% of the tenants, they are young people living in that building. And the number 5, for example, it's mainly for a little bit older formerly homeless people. And I must stress that no one is forced to live in any of these units. People choose to live in them by themselves. So it's all about people's choice. And like I said, after this COVID especially, there's a huge fear of loneliness among people. So they don't want to move into scattered housing at the moment in some of the big cities. People want to move in these housing first units where there is the community, where there is work activities, and so on. And I can totally understand it. Back in 2018, when I started work at the Y Foundation and we had some visitors, I won't say the country, but they saw some of these places and they were like horrified that how can you house formerly homeless people together like that? That's not housing first. Last year, the same group came back to Finland and asked the blueprints. So things change. And then I, that's how it goes sometimes. But like I said, we like to think people first, what people actually need. If they need other housing options besides scattered housing, that's our responsibility to make sure that those options are there for them as well. And one of the great things about these units is that it's not all about the community inside the unit. It's also the community outside the unit. They are part of the neighborhood, part of the community there. They do a bunch of stuff together with the neighborhood. So it's not all about just, former homeless people creating a community of their own, but it's about community of the neighborhood as well. And I think that's magnificent. So these hybrid solutions, this is Väylä. I would say the name in English is like pathway. And then it's in the city of Järvenpää, 45 minutes from Helsinki. And there is 74 affordable state-subsidized homes, and then there is also a small unit, 20 apartments for formerly homeless people. And there is also this day center in the middle of the block, and the day center is open for the whole neighborhood. And it has really become the heart of the neighborhood, so to speak, the living room for the neighborhood. So they have their different kind of activities. The neighborhood, the older ladies have knitting classes, there's book clubs, computer classes, photography lessons, all these kind of things. And of course, the former homeless people, they attend into these activities, and it has been a good way to integrate into the existing neighborhood that's in there. And it has worked really, really well. No one asked the question, are you the one who lives in that unit or anything like that? And we have I think the name comes that we have always also created this pathway that if you want to move out from the unit for some reason, you don't like to live in the community-based aspect anymore, you want to have more independent, so we have created scattered housing nearby the unit as well, so people can actually move out as well. And usually, many of the visitors, they ask that what happens if someone is living in a unit where the support is there 24/7 and they don't need the support anymore? Would it become a reality that you have a whole building of people who don't need any kind of support? Well, if that happens, so be it. It's their home, it's permanent housing. But then again, we have found out that when people don't really need any kind of support, some of the people have started working outside the unit, they have daily jobs, they tend to move out into scattered housing by themselves. That happens. So these are the newest evolutions of the housing that we have created. I think the names are quite horrible, but whatever. The first is Dices. It's actually Dices in the Finnish language as well, Nopat. But it's a great concept. So there is a housing first unit, 26 apartments. And out of those 26 apartments, 7 are these kind of singular dices. They are in the same yard or same plot as the main housing unit, but it's meant for people who want to have the community aspect, who want to have heavy support, but who don't want to live right next to each other. So we have created this kind of dice model that, you have the community there, you have the support 24/7, but you have your own privacy regarding that you have this your own small dice home there. And it has worked really, really well. And I hope to see these kind of things more in the future. And then the second picture is scattered unit. And then this building, it has been built by the Youth Housing Association, where I used to work many years ago. And there is 95 apartments, affordable homes for young people in the work life. So not for students, but young people who are working. And out of those 95 apartments, 15 are meant for young homeless people. And they are all around the building, those apartments. So not in one floor, anything like that, but they are all around. And then there is support on site 12 hours a day. The phone is on 24/7. And then it has worked brilliantly for the young people. And I think here the main thing is that the other people living in the building, they don't know which apartments are for my homeless people. And when the young people, they don't need the support anymore, they can still live there, it's permanent housing, but then again, they can also move somewhere else if they wish. And this is just a picture, one of the apartments, studio apartments, you have all the basic things, oven, fridge, bathroom, kitchen, all the necessities you need so that you can call it a home. And then the furniture people, they acquire by themselves because it's their home and it should look like one. And all of the units, they have sauna, of course. Like I said, it's a mandatory thing in Finland. You need to have a common sauna so you can relax a bit. And then in the units, the common facilities, so every floor usually they have some kind of community room where there's a TV, computer, all these kind of things. Also a community kitchen, so if you wanna throw a dinner party with your friends, you can cook there and you don't need to use your own home for that, for example. So many things. And the community rooms, they are really, really important for people, as I was talking about the loneliness thing. So if you go to the community areas, there's usually someone else as well, watching TV, playing with the computer or stuff like that. So you can hang out together. And here is a few more pictures regarding those. So, back to square one. We believe that it's necessary to offer different housing options for people, because one size doesn't fit for all when it comes to housing. People have different needs, people want different things, and I think we should listen. I think that's the main thing. And one of the things what we did when we started renovating the existing shelters and temporary accommodation into permanent homes is that people who were staying in those shelters and temporary accommodation, they were part of the planning committee, making sure that the apartments have all the different kind of things they need and so on. And if it wasn't without them, I would say that the units wouldn't work as well as they have. They had a huge influence in that process. And I think the second thing is a quite bold statement, but I'm not afraid to say it. If we really want to end homelessness, is scattered housing enough? Just to throw it out there. So this is how we have prevent homelessness. So the affordable housing is the main thing. It's the best structural element against homelessness, and sooner you start building affordable housing, the sooner you will have the stock you need. It will take some years for sure, and in the meanwhile you need to work with some other options as well, but sooner you start, sooner you will be ready, that's for sure. But then we also have this service called housing advice services, which means that if you have any kind of problems with your rent, mortgage, any housing related issues, you can contact these housing advisors and they will try to do everything in their power to make sure that you don't get evicted in the worst case scenarios. And then at the moment we are having a limited time 5-year law regarding these services, so anyone living in Finland have to have access into these housing advice services if they need to. And it's under city's responsibility to offer those services for the people. So with these two things, we have been doing okay. So what are the critical elements of ending homelessness from the Finnish perspective? Well, affordable social housing. I have attended many conferences during the past 12 months or so, especially in Europe, and it always surprises me how little we in Europe actually talk about the lack of housing. Because if we think about housing first, and if we take the housing part away, what's left first of what? I don't know. So I think that's something that we need to, especially on a European level, to talk about more on a EU level and a policy level, that how we can have the housing stock we need. In Finland as well, we are lacking affordable housing at the moment as well. In Finland, we have the general housing benefit, which means that if your income is low enough, I should say, then you can claim this housing benefit, which enables that you can pay your rent. And then the implementation of housing first, wide partnership. You need to have all the key stakeholders in the same table, the government, cities, municipalities, service providers, landlords, people with lived experience, the current homeless people. You need to have everyone on board. And then what we find out in Finland is that it really helped that we had these concrete goals that we monitored very closely. So for example, when we started in 2008, all the cities had different goals. For example, in the city of Turku, they had a goal that they would build 200 new homes for young homeless people. And that happened. They monitored that process very closely. So every 3 months, they would get together, the steering group, and make sure that they are doing okay. And if not, what can we do to help you? So concrete quantitative goals that are easy to find out if you are doing the right work or not. Individual level, I would say housing first as a mainstream policy. And what I mean about the housing, when I talk about housing first, I'm not talking about certain program or project, but this kind of holistic approach. It doesn't matter if you're working in a shelter or a temporary accommodation, any of the housing first principles, you can work with them in those solutions as well. And then, try to add different flavors to the housing first as well, I would say. I think during this week I've heard many discussions regarding how prevention is crucial when it comes to homelessness work, and it really is. And then again, I've heard that housing first is the main thing. But how about combining these things together so that they wouldn't be a different thing, but housing first would include the prevention side of the work as well. I think that could work. Permanent housing solutions, different housing solutions. I can't stress enough, different people, different needs. So what has worked in Finland, and I will have the challenges and the failures as well, it's not a fairy tale, trust me. But we have found homes for over 6,000 former homeless people. And I think that has been quite a good achievement since 2008. But the biggest thing has been the systemic change from shelters, from temporary accommodation into permanent homes and into housing first philosophy. This kind of holistic approach how we do the work in all sectors. Prevention, like I said, we like to think that housing first and prevention go hand in hand. Can't have one without the other. We have always built affordable state-subsidized housing, like I have said many times, but I can't stress that enough because it's important. Experts by experience, they have been involved in all the activities, all the planning, decision-making, development, training, you name it, we have people who have lived experience under their belt, and also current homeless people are taking part into these things. It's really important. Culture of collaboration. This may sound like an easy thing to do, but what I have found out that it's quite hard actually to have all the different departments working together towards the same goal. So when we are talking about, cost benefits, for example, usually the question starts at which organization is saving the money and which is putting more money on the table. So it's never an easy thing to do, but I think that's something that needs to be happening. And development network. like CA, training, sharing the information, do the advocacy work, do the lobbying work. That's all needed, very much so. And now, what has not worked so well? What are the failures? And I will start with the one that has been bold. We've had a new government since 2023, July, and it's a little bit on the right side. And what they have done so far is that they have defund services, defund NGOs. They want to build less affordable housing in the future, not in the next 2 or 3 years, but from 27 on. And they have cut the social benefits. That has led to a situation where, this is my own humble opinion or prediction, but I think the number of homeless people in Finland will unfortunately go up in the coming years. So that's what has happened in Finland, and this is something that we are working really hard to make the government and the policymakers and the decision makers understand once again that, we had a perfectly fine system, so please do not interrupt with it at this time. But we'll see. It's a tough times everywhere in Europe as well. The right wing is gaining more and more popular, and same thing happened in Finland, and here we are. But of course, we are working every day to make sure that they understand what they are doing and see the consequences of those decisions. But then the attitudes in Finland, and what I mean by that is that if you ever come to Helsinki, I don't know about the future, but if you come in within the next 2-3 months, you won't see people sleeping on the streets, and that's something that we are really proud of. No encampments, no tents, no sleeping bags, nothing like that. And that's something that we are really proud of. But that has created this kind of illusion that some of the public think that we don't have homelessness anymore, that we have taken care of the issue, so why put any more effort towards it? So that's why we, Y Foundation and many other NGOs, we are working every day that, that people realize that there are still many hundreds homeless people in Finland living in uncertain situations, and we are not done until everyone have a home of their own. And the other thing is that especially after the COVID, more people need more heavy support, mental health challenges, substance abuse, all these kind of things, and people need more and more support. But that's why I think we are in a lucky position in that sense that we have these different housing models for people, so people actually get the support they need. Nothing in my backyard, yes, still thing in Finland as well. And then last May we held an international homeless conference in Helsinki, and we had a keynote speaker from Australia, Professor Cameron Parcell, and he told me that in Australia there is nothing in my backyard, but not there either. So they have really taking this thing seriously. But that's a thing in Finland as well, in some cases. So it doesn't concern the affordable state-subsidized housing, but when we are building a new housing first unit, for example, there might be some resistance from the neighborhood, and then we need to work with the neighborhood, of course. And lack of affordable homes. Even though we have a quite good affordable housing stock, we still need more. And especially now, when all the prices are, going off the roof, interest rates are going up, and so on, there is a big need for affordable housing. So, what does a city without homelessness look like? I think it's good to visualize this as well nowadays, because I think some people might have forgotten. So like I said, with the housing first and all the other efforts, Helsinki and the other big cities has more or less end street homelessness in their cities. So this picture, I have a huge passion towards photography, and I have taken these pictures. Sometimes I like to say it's like the love of my life, but then again, I don't think it's fair regarding my wife to say that, so I will leave it there. But this usually is one of those places where in other European cities you will find homeless people sleeping under the central railway station. But like in today's morning keynote, Mark showed you the brief video of Jan Vapaavuori, but that is completely true in my opinion as well. I believe that we need to communicate the benefits for the public as well when we take care of the most vulnerable people in our society. It's good for the cities, more vibrant cities, safer cities, good for the restaurants, coffees, visitors. It might even lure in some foreign investments, you never know. But that's one thing that we have learned in Finland as well, and that's something we did back in 2008 when we started this. Because believe me, there were many people questioning, should we spend this money towards homeless people? Aren't there any other things that we could use that money for? So Jan Vapaavuori, the minister, and the other politicians, they were really straightforward that it's good for everyone. And that's how they get the buy-in from the public as well. But not everyone thinks housing is a human right, and they don't care about the safety of the cities or any of those things. So, of course, we like to say that it's a cost-effective thing as well. We have done some studies in Finland which shows that if you house people with the support they need, you actually end up having savings around 15,000 euros per person per year, comparing that they would be on the streets or a shelter or in a temporary accommodation. And then September 23, there was a big study made in city of Brussels, the capital of EU and Belgium, I should say, and they end up having the same conclusion, that one homeless person cost the city of Brussels 40,000 euros a year, and if that person was given a home and the support, it was 25,000 a year. So the cost savings, once again, were 15,000. And I think you all know Dr. Andrew Boosary from the city of Toronto, and I'm glad to call him a friend now, but they have made some great work regarding that, acknowledging that homeless people tend to use a lot the emergency services, and when they are done and when they can exit the hospital, they're back on the streets, and within a few weeks, they're back in the hospital. And that's why I think the Done House that Andrew and the partners have created in the city of Toronto is a great example of what can be done when you take action instead of speaking. So before I close, these are some of the things we have been thinking about, what we need to end homelessness. So we need action, because my fear is that housing will at some point become privilege for the few, but it should be a human right for all. And don't get me wrong, I think it's great and we should every day celebrate the small victories we get out of our work. That's something I do every day. Good email, you can count on me, I will celebrate that one. But the reality is that we need to create thousands and thousands of affordable homes. Not only here in Canada, in Europe, in Finland, in the US as well, if we want to dream about ending homelessness. And maybe not just creating the scattered ones, maybe using some of the existing stock we already have, lying on empty in the city centers. I remember last spring I was in the city of Atlanta, and the downtown was quite empty regarding that there were many office buildings and the companies had left. So what they start to do there is that they are renovating those empty office buildings into affordable homes for people. And their goal is to have 20,000 new affordable homes by 2030. And I think that's a bold goal, but they are on their way. They have already created over 3,000. Different ways, not just building, but also renovating the existing stock. And the other part here is it can be a little bit provocative, in my opinion, but that's why it's there, to give you some things to think about. So what's more important? Fidelity to the housing first model or ending homelessness? And this comes from the European perspective, where sometimes I feel like that we are more concerned about the fidelity to the model than actually housing the people. And we are working for the model, but the model is not working housing the people. So that's something that, we have good discussions every now and then with my European colleagues. What's more important? And as you have seen today, the Finnish housing first, it's quite flexible housing first model, but it works. And I'm not saying that, any other country should copy the Finnish model, no way. You can learn from the best practices, the good bits and pieces, and make it work in your own society, in your own systems, to have adaptation of your own. Because what amazes me sometimes is that I have a huge respect towards Sam Chambers, and I'm glad to call him a friend as well. But if we would have taken the 1990s New York model to Finland as a housing first, I wouldn't be here talking today, I can guarantee you that. So I think it's important that we take advantages of our own societies and make the housing first adaptations to look like our housing first. So what's housing first Canada looks like, for example. So we collaborate European and international levels. We do a bunch of development, research and training together with Housing First Europe, Hub Feanza, European platform on combating homelessness. And then a year ago we founded this Nordic Homelessness Alliance, which brings together all the Nordic countries, and we are working together. And the goal for our alliance is to create the world-leading model to end homelessness. So beware of that. And I would like to end with this slide. Like I have said many times during the presentation, you can't have housing first without having housing first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juha. And we know the provocative ending. Are there any questions? There's a mic back there. I don't know if there's someone passing out a microphone as well. Not obvious, but there is at least a mic over there, so I encourage you to line up and ask your questions. Thank you.
Hello. Juha, from one European to another European, thank you for making the trip across here to present this to us. I think you're in the wrong building. There's a building just along the street from here that may be better served to hear what you've got to present. Can I just ask, I think the work you've done is fantastic. The way that the Scandinavian countries, between Norway, Sweden and yourselves, and the attitude you bring towards solving problems, you involve the communities, and it's something that I've studied quite a lot over the years. What's the growth in population in Finland like? Because one of the things I hear here since moving to Canada is that the influx of immigrants to Canada is driving a problem with housing. And I wondered if Finland suffered the same issue, or is it coming because rising costs of living are forcing people out of what they would normally think was their permanent home, but rental properties have gone in like higher in cost, and is that driving the homelessness issue, the lack of affordable housing, because they're getting more people coming from ownership into rental, and what does that look like for Finland?
Thank you. It's always good to see fellow Europeans. And then, yeah, the second question first, yeah, that is the driving factor, the cost of living, and the people who are owning their apartments at the moment, they cannot keep up with the mortgages because the interest rates have been going up, so they are also starting to rent. And so it has created this kind of situation where there is not enough affordable housing for anyone at the moment in Finland either. The other question is that, I say unfortunately, there are not too many people who want to come to Finland for one reason or another. So we really need more immigrants to enter to Finland. But at the moment, the reality is that there is somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 people entering yearly. And the need for us is 10,000 to 15,000. And I don't know if it's because we are on the Russian border, far away from everything, might be one of the reasons. But then again, on a serious note, I've heard also in many European countries, they are saying that the immigration is one of the biggest reasons that the number of homelessness is rising. But I don't think that's true. I think the housing crisis have been there before immigration have started to go off. And nevertheless, we need to house the people who are entering into our countries, and everyone deserves a home of their own. So I understand the issue, but then again, I think we shouldn't have that as an excuse. And what I have learned also is that in many countries, the immigration services pushes the challenges towards the homeless sector. So I think there are more effective ways to do the work and, do work together. I think that's the main thing that's missing at the moment. In the Nordic countries as well, that the immigrant services and the homeless services are not working together effectively enough, and that's causing challenges, or people are ending up on the streets, for example, in Sweden.
Thank you, Hula. My name's Mike O'Connor. I'm from Grand Prairie, Alberta. And I discovered your program, PAVO 1 and PAVO through the Global Institute on Homelessness. And Louise Casey's case study showed that Finland was the only country to do that, is to solve homelessness. I'm very impressed with that. But there is a lot of costs. And how do you have your government invest on a national stage to create homes? And so I know that your lottery corporations fund that. I don't know how we convince our government to do that. Do you have any suggestions on how we convince people to invest and build these structures, because those buildings are not inexpensive?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a good question, and I think I have to go quite far away to the history lane once again. But I think it started after the Second World War, when we lost a lot of land to Russia, and 400,000 people were left on the wrong side of the border. And when they moved back into the right side of the border, we needed to house them. And that was the starting point for the affordable housing, state-subsidized affordable housing in Finland. So we have this kind of DNA in our veins that, everyone deserves a home of their own, and we should do everything in our power to make sure that everyone has it. And then one of the things that, it's a difference for sure between US and Finland is that whereas US, quite many politicians and decision makers sees homelessness as a failure of an individual, we see homelessness as a failure of our society. And that's the big difference I think we are having. And like I said, the housing minister, he was a champion. And then in that May homeless conference in Helsinki, he said that he needed to prioritize. To find all this money towards homelessness, he prioritized that they build a little bit less housing for young students, for example, a little bit less other types of housing, and that's how they found the money to put towards the homelessness work. But the main thing here, once again, is that we need to be open to the public as well. What's the benefits for the whole public, the cities, and once again, the cost savings as well. Even though we are putting a lot of money into the system, we are still saving money on a long run. And we have also studies to prove that as well, that since 2016, we have been actually saving money while doing the work, instead of we haven't done nothing in 2008. So it's a two-way sword in that sense. But, if you want to call yourself a civil society, that means that you need to house everyone, and everyone deserves a home of their own. That would be my main message. And like I said, it may seem like a long road for the government and the politicians as well, but sooner you start, the sooner you will be finished as well. So that's why it's sometimes hard to have, hear politicians talk about that we should build, and not that we will build, because there's a big difference.
Yeah. My last point, and I respect other people coming up behind me, I'm just concerned about the elephant in the room, is that the drugs and the opioids, what steps has Finland taken to prevent and get that off the streets so people aren't forced out of their homes, forced to be downgraded? So I'm just wondering, what steps have you taken to do that?
Yeah, well, we do a bunch of outreach work. So we have a lot of NGOs doing outreach work with the people who have drug abuse challenges, and there's also local police officers who work together with these NGOs, and together collaborating with each other, they try to make their best so that less people would end up having those challenges. But yeah, it's not an easy road. I know that, and I'm fortunate enough to say that in Finland we don't have fentanyl yet, at least. So that has caused many things here and in the US, I've learned. But yeah, working together on a local level, together with the police officers, having this kind of empowerment way to do the work, and no sweeps or nothing like that, but just working together with the people and offer possibilities. That's what people need. Different possibilities in their lives. And someone who trusts them.
Hello, my name is Jessica Cochran. I live and work in Victoria, British Columbia. And I just wanted to say welcome and thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. You're gathered with many Canadians that work in housing and who are constantly thinking of solutions to the housing crisis. And my question for you was if you could share your thoughts on different solutions such as the pallet shelters. There are other words for it. They're kind of like tiny homes, small modular homes. You could even call them a shack. And while I was watching your presentation, I was noticing that the different housing solutions that your organization have put forward didn't look like that visually. I didn't see any of the same visuals. And so my thoughts were, my question was, what are your thoughts on that kind of solution?
You mean tiny homes?
Tiny homes, pallet shelter villages, just small kind of enclosed spaces that are meant as emergency housing, because in your presentation you also said that temporary solutions tend to turn into permanent solutions. And so I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that, because that was an idea that I recently came across that I thought was innovative and potentially an answer. And I just want to know what your thoughts are on that, if that is a worthwhile pursuit and if it would be worthwhile.
Thank you for the good question. I would say what we have witnessed in Europe, especially in the UK with the temporary housing, I think the problem there has been that it has become permanent for the people. But it hasn't removed the insecurity from the people. So they don't know when they will be getting their own home. They are in this kind of, revolving door, waiting for the next day, next month, next year. And it has also caused that almost 50% of the UK local authorities are on the edge of a bankruptcy because they cannot spend so much money on temporary housing. So that's why I'm a little bit hesitating when we're talking about temporary housing solutions. But then again, I understand that there is a need for some of that in the work. And when it comes to tiny houses, I don't know if I should say this, but it's a tiny solution for a massive problem.
That is such a great answer. Thank you so much. I just want to add before I pass the microphone over that I've been very inspired by the elected officials here at this conference, speaking about the wealth of our country. And we do have a lot of land, but I've just been touched by your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the kind words.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Absolutely fantastic. I noticed in one of your slides that there was a quite significant drop in your homeless population, both in 2003 and in 2018. I wonder for the 2018 number, whether you feel that that is related to the preventative measures that you put in 2016 and the M2 apartments. I also wonder if it's possible that the drastic drop from 2017-2018 had anything to do with the basic income experiment?
No, it was such a small experiment, so that doesn't have anything to do with those numbers. But you are right. The preventive program, it started to kick in, and we were able to reduce the number of people inflowing into homelessness, and that was the key. And of course, the other work we had done within the past decade, it also keep building up, and with the different housing solutions and so on, we were able to house more and more people. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. In Canada, we're obviously lacking a lot of non-market social housing, but I think we're also lacking policies to deter corporations and investors in buying up the private stock. And I was wondering if Finland has policies to deter private investing in housing for like large corporations or non-foreign residents buying it up? Yeah.
No, we don't. And I think the main thing is that, like I said, that the cities has this kind of it's not a contract, but it's a commitment together with the government that they will build 25% of affordable housing in each of the living areas they are building. And 11 biggest cities in Finland have that agreement with the government. So that has led us into a situation that we don't need to have any kind of other policies, because we know that if there's going to be a new neighborhood with let's say, 10,000 apartments, 2,500 has to be affordable housing in that neighborhood. So we have created that, no, well, you can call it a policy, but it's through zoning, actually, yeah.
Thank you.
Hello. I'm curious about one of the topics you addressed, which was talked about the housing benefit. Finland and Scandinavian countries, generally speaking, can really claim to great social net, safety nets, and support of the lesser and real community approach. Not really the case here in Canada. How, I mean, the word global, basic income was brought up earlier. I think that's a question that is currently on the table here in Canada. How much of that safety net is a part of your solution, I guess, would be my question.
It's a massive part of the solution, of course. Without the safety net, once again, I wouldn't be here talking to you. It's a huge thing that we have there. And then again, if we look at the other Scandinavian countries, Denmark is doing great with the homelessness at the moment, Norway as well, but when it comes to Sweden, the work hasn't been as consistent regarding the other Scandinavian countries. So, I think you have to have the basic safety net there, and it helps. It surely helps, and for us, it's a massive advantage. But then again, you also need to do the work on top of it to achieve.
Of course, yeah.
But it's a massive asset for us, of course. I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's clearly an issue here. Housing is one thing, but being able to afford even percentage of rate of rent is essential. So.
Yeah, so I've heard. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello. Echoing my thanks for making the long journey across and spending your time. I just have a question about the 25% policy that you mentioned that mandates the affordable social housing. We, across provinces in Canada, we're seeing more inclusionary zonings come into play that do something similar, but they've been subject to much debate, whether the inclusionary zoning just eats into developer profitability or if these charges are inherently regressive, impacting renters and people looking to purchase their first home but not existing, typically wealthier landowners. I just wanted to know, given its history in Finland, if you have any research or thoughts on how that's actually played out with the equity lens.
That's a good question. We don't have research regarding that, but I think one of the things that I've learned during this week here is that when we talk about affordable housing, I've heard, I think, 3 different variations. I've heard affordable housing, deeply affordable housing, deeply affordable housing, and social housing. So I'm not too sure what's the difference between all these affordable models. But like I said, we have long traditions and we have been building it for 7 decades and never stopped. And there's no this kind of stigmatization behind the labeling affordable social housing. And, the quality is exactly as any other apartment building. It has to be good because the regulations are quite strict. But we don't have any evidence that it has boosted the rents up in those private sector apartments or boost the cost of apartments up in any ways. On the opposite, I would say.
Okay. Oh, thank you also for the presentation and for the work of the Y Foundation to make this happen in Finland. It's really important and inspirational for those of us from different parts of the world that are struggling. My question is, it's a little different. It's about this idea of community integration. That's been a central theme in Housing First in North America, is how can we help people get integrated back into the community? And that's there's many dimensions to that, but when we were talking before your presentation, we talked about a culture of introversion that exists. And I'm just wondering if this has a, I didn't see any mention of community integration in your presentation. Is this a concept that resonates? Does it make sense? Is this something that you think about when you're in your Housing First programs?
Yeah, it's huge part that there has to be community integration there. And inside the units and outside in the neighborhood as well. And one of the newest Housing First units we actually built less than a year ago, it's in the middle of a suburb. There's an elderly care home, grocery store, and a kindergarten nearby. And they are doing these work activities. And it has happened that some of the men from the elderly care home, they want to jump into those work activities, for example. So it has created this kind of informal way to do the community integration between the different services around the area as well. So now, for example, when the elderly care home, they have some furniture that needs to be fixed, they bring all that furniture into the Housing First unit, and people during their work activities will do that. The other story is there's a grocery store nearby, and when we opened the unit, the shoplifting went off the roof. And the manager of that store came into one of the community meetings and discussed about this thing, that it's a problem for us, that if the shoplifting continues, that we need to raise the prices, and it's not beneficial any of you. But he was a really, really good guy, and what happened afterwards, that part of the work activities actually means now that there's always someone from the unit, if someone wants, working in that grocery store. And the shoplifting has almost stopped completely. And then so, of course, community integration is really important, and we like to see it like inside of the units, but then again, gathering the other parts of the neighborhood and around the communities, around the units and people, so that they could integrate themselves back to the society one way or another. And then there is not one way to do it. I think we work in multiple angles. Work is one of the things, but then again, neighborhood work, community meetings together with the neighborhood, all these kind of things that people get this kind of feeling that they are part of something. Not just part of the community inside the Housing First, but part of the neighborhood around them, and we are that part of the society as well.
Hi, thank you for that presentation, and really appreciate that lens that it's a societal goal, that housing is a human, or is seen as a human right. And so just kind of speaking to like just the spectrum of housing, going from homeless to shelter to transitional home to market, is there a goal other than everyone has housing in Finland to move into market at some point? Or is it that as long as you need, you are within that, you are within the affordable housing? So I'm wondering if is there a push at some point of it to go into market?
No, there is no push. So basically you can live there as long as you wish, but there is this kind of normal moving. So, people's situations, they change. People start families, they found a partner, they change a job, they move to another city. Of course, then the situation can change, that they move from affordable housing into market housing or vice versa. But no one is pushed to move anywhere. It's all about the security, that you have your own home and you can feel safe there and no one is pushing you around.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I noticed in your presentation lots of the discussion about the collaboration between governments was between the city level and the federal level, noting that that's two levels of government, and often in Canada we've got a third level of government. Is there a involvement or a role or potential role for a provincial or a regional level government, or is that something that's not part of this system?
I think there is a role, and in the presentation it's not mentioned, but we have also now the third level of government. So we are having these new, it's a horrible word, social and health well-being counties, which is like first there's the municipality level, then the social well-being counties, and then the government level. But the collaboration continues. There has been some changes regarding that. Now the cities are responsible of the housing, and then the well-being counties are responsible regarding the support people need. But I think it has taken some time, but I think they have worked together closely and then in a collaboration to make sure that nobody falls into these kind of loopholes. That's always a danger when you add a new layer of governments there. But I think it works, and there are many countries in Europe as well where there are 3 or 4 government levels, and unless you get all of those on board, I think it will be quite hard to end homelessness altogether, but one step at a time.
Hi, my name is Tori. I work in the frontline sector in St. John's, Newfoundland. I didn't really have a question. I just wanted to say that I think that I can speak for a lot of us here that this is a very frustrating job at times. And I think that your presentation has given me a lot of hope for what the future could be for all of us. And I just wanted to thank you for giving that to me today. So thank you.
Apologies, that probably would have been the perfect way to end this. That said, thank you so much for your presentation. It was fantastic. I just want to pick up on the prevention angle a little bit more. Something that I spent a lot of time thinking about in the course of my work. And I know that when you're sort of having that adjustment from the resources going to emergency services and it going more towards the prevention, I noted in your presentation sort of the framing of affordable social housing as structural prevention, which I love that. I'm going to probably be using that excessively in my upcoming drafting document. And also some reference to sort of stepping in at the point of eviction and maybe stepping in, I don't know what that is, landlord-tenant mediation or some sort of rental subsidy or something like that. I guess my question is just sort of what preventative upstream activities have proven successful in Finland?
Yeah. That you can use the structural prevention element for sure.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's those housing advice services which I mentioned. So they are like between the landlords and then the tenant. So if you are struggling to pay the rent, for example, it's the housing advisors who will have the discussions with your landlord if you don't want to have those discussions by yourself. And they are there with you together. And they are able to make payment plans with the landlord so that if you are lacking the rent money, so you can pay it back little by little so it won't crash your financial situation and lead into another kind of problems. And then I think that has been the most scalable way of doing the work. And like I said, it's city's responsibility at the moment to offer those services for people living in their cities. But for example, at the Y Foundation, we have 16 of our own housing advisors to provide the services for our tenants. And then I would say it has been a crucial part of the work. And of course, now we have artificial intelligence and all these kind of things in our systems, which means that, we can find out if someone is lacking 20 euros from the rent every month. So we can have action instead of them reaching us. We can also reach them to ask that if there's something that we can do for you, is everything okay? Just checking in, and no pressure if you don't want to hear from us. But it works in both ways, and with AI, I think we can find more meaningful ways to do the work, and it will be even better preventive tool for us.
Just a quick question. I'm from BC. We gave the world this wonderful term called renoviction. And I lived in communities where I've had clients renovated 3 times, and the laws are a little better now in BC. But I just wonder how, evictions work in the free market there. Like, it's a big deal in BC. Like, if you ask anybody in the last 10 years how many times they've been evicted through no fault. I mean, the stats are staggering. So I'm just curious what the free market attitude there is, or how that works with the equivalent of your tenancy board or branch.
That's a good question, and I would say, I will give credit to the private sector in Finland, because I will say that they are, when they are operating with the tenants, I think they show good manners. You cannot be evicted within a month or within a 2 months. It's always a longer period, and they cannot evict you without a proper reason, which means that you haven't paid your rents for many months, or that you have causing all the time some kind of disturbances in the house to the neighbors and so on. So I think in that sense, the private market and the private construction companies and landlords in Finland, I think they work relatively fine. I think the only thing is that the rents are too high for many of the people, and that's the biggest difference compared to the affordable housing sector.
Hi, thanks again for your presentation. Just a really quick question. You mentioned the AI models and how that certain data points can help you predict who might be at risk of experiencing homelessness. So you mentioned rent payments. I've seen studies in the States where they'll track utility payments as an early indicator as well. Are there any other factors that you look at?
No, that's it at the moment, and that's something that the AI is one of the things that we really are putting our efforts in the future, and there is a lot of collaboration between the Community Solutions, the Rockefeller Foundation, and many other NGOs and private companies around Europe as well. So hopefully in the future we have some more indicators regarding that.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anita. I work with United Way, Centraide Canada. I wanted to ask about the implementation of some of the things you discussed around housing first, the hybrid model and whatnot in rural communities. If that, how that plays out, how it might be different from some of the urban places?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and that's something that we have been discussing quite a bit, because in Finland, in the rural areas, we rarely have any homelessness, so we haven't really confronted that issue in that sense. So, but what I have learned from my colleagues from UK and Scotland is that when it comes to rural areas, it depends what people need. If they want to live in scattered housing, then you should offer them scattered housing there. But in some cases, some of the rural communities, they have created these kind of units for people, and they are quite happy about it, and they have created this sort of, like I was explaining, these kind of living rooms for the rural areas as well. So people from all around the county will come together and have different kind of things and activities they can do. So of course it depends.
And actually, further to that, I'm wondering about the handle you have or the data collected on hidden homelessness. So how you know. And I apologize, I missed the earlier part of your presentation. So if you covered that, I apologize.
No, that's a good question. And every year we have this annual homelessness night, which was around 3 weeks ago. And the theme for that night was actually hidden homelessness, because we don't have all the numbers for sure. And so that's an issue that we want to raise on the table for the politicians and everyone else to see that, hey, there are people who we don't know are homeless, and we should make sure that they feel comfortable to come to the services. And if they are not comfortable, what we can do to our services, that in the future they would come or we could find them.
Okay, I don't see anybody else at the mic, and it is just about 11:45, so I think we'll close it here. Thank you very much, Juha, and this has been really inspirational.